So I'll go ahead and start with introductions and we can see if anybody else wants to. So my name is Jessica Abbott and I am a director for Women Who Code Indianapolis. We're still a pretty new chapter of that global organization, Women Who Code. I think we're coming on, I think we're actually at a year now. We kind of missed our anniversary party, I guess.
We should have had
Yeah, that's too bad. But we've been building as we go along, and this is our first time partnering up with IndyPy, which is really exciting, and because they're a really awesome, well-established group. So, oh, and I'm a.
We should have sent cake to everyone for your anniversary.
Yeah, I don't know, Fatima, what day would it have been? I don't remember exactly what day.
It was April 24th.
24th. Okay, yeah. So it wasn't that long ago.
Mm-hmm.
You can do a belated birthday party once everything blows
Yeah,
up.
we can get together.
Yeah. When we can all actually eat cake or something.
Mm-hmm.
I'm happy to host a cookout here at the house.
That sounds fun.
So there's folks here who don't know me. I'm Calvin Hendricks Parker. I'm one of the co-organizers of IndyPy, along with Mary Beth and Josh, who are also on the meeting. And we love organizing community and building a tribe. So this fits in our wheelhouse perfectly to do something like this and help support Women Who Code and make sure we get most people the most exposure they can to new experiences and obviously Python.
Mm-hmm. So like Calvin said, I'm one of the co-organizers of IndyPy. We also run the AWS user group here in town. Just felt like there was a lot of silos, a lot of different kind of groups who were operating kind of in the same space, and we felt like it made a lot of sense to reach out to some other groups and kind of do some collaborative events. So we added this onto our calendar, and really excited to be here and kind of do some more collaborative stuff.
I'll go. I'm Raina. I found out about this group from Maya. I'm a student at Kinsey and I'm studying UX engineering.
Yay, I'm glad you're here, Raina. So since you said that, I guess I'll go. I'm Maya Williams. I work at Kinsey Academy teaching UX design to high school students. I'm also one of the directors for the Indianapolis chapter. So yeah, thanks everyone for coming. And I know nothing about Python, so I'm here to learn today.
I can go next. I'm Fatima. I'm also one of the directors from Women Who Code, and I work as a manager of solution architects for Lev.
So my name's Alyssa. I work with Python doing a lot of like data science, machine learning, and that kind of stuff. And I found out about this through IndyPy.
Okay. I'm Bob. I graduated from Kinsey Academy about a year ago. Then I did a 12-month rotation in the Kinsey studio. It's been about a year since I really did much Python coding. So I'm looking forward to tonight. It's just a refresher.
Hi, I think we're all introducing ourselves. I'm Jen. I do a lot of Python scripting, pushing and pulling data from different places and uploading them to different places. I do a lot of Google Apps script too. That's my two big things.
Hi, I'm Kimberly. I'm actually an email marketing and automation specialist, so don't really have any familiarity with Python. So that's why I hopped on this call to get an understanding of it and kind of get some background in it in case I need it for any future projects or anything like that. So yeah, excited to learn.
Hi, everybody. My name is Erin Croto. I'm a student at 1150 Academy learning C#. And I don't know anything about Python yet, so I thought this would be a great opportunity to get some exposure to it.
Awesome. Well, it's awesome. It's great to meet everybody. I'm gonna wait at least a couple more minutes. I know we on the meetup event we said we're gonna wait till around 7:15 just to give people the chance to pop on. So if there's anybody who wants to answer the question, how long have you been in tech? Feel free to pop in and.
I think I'll incriminate myself if I say the answer to that question. I can tell you our company's been in business, which I'm a co-founder of, for 21 years.
That's awesome. Mine is right around 12, so.
Yeah, I'm going on 16 years.
Nice.
Whoa, Chrissy, you're making me feel old now.
I know, well, I graduated from college in 2004.
The story I like to tell is when I was in school, I was in a brand new multimedia degree and they were still kind of teaching how to do DVD design, like DVD menu design is what we were actually had classes on. So.
Yeah, I don't know like what you would say like qualifies as being in tech. I can tell you when I learned how to program was, Calvin, how long was this ago? Like 6 years, 6 or 7 years now?
It must have been 5 or 6.
5 or 6 years ago, 1150. I now work with and for kind of Calvin, but he actually taught me how to program in Python about 5 or 6 years ago. So all came full circle. Now we work together. So not necessarily a developer or anything like that, but I've been in tech for a little while. At least I like to think so.
What's the best way to get some new developers is to build your own, right? That was a long play on my part, right?
It's a long con.
Long con. That's probably more accurate.
If you consider being in technology the first time you break something.
Oh.
See, it was maybe middle schoolish. I don't know. We had a Windows 3.1 computer that we just put Windows 95 on. And I was very excited about this new game that required Windows 95. But it took up a lot of room. And I deleted part of the operating system to make enough room for this game to fit. And I was very proud that I got it to fit until I tried to reboot the computer.
That's the way it should be. That's how we learn.
Yeah, I
That's
remember
my
breaking
first big
things
memory
like
of
that.
technology.
Yeah, I remember breaking things like that on a Windows machine in the mid-90s. Like going in and renamed some files I should not have renamed, and about the same thing. You know, spend some time with tech support and they couldn't fix it. I eventually fixed it on my own.
Oh yeah, there was also the time that for the longest time the C drive was called C Alyssa, and no one could figure out how I did it or how to undo it. So I guess technology and me were just, you know, destined to be best friends.
You know, the Windows 95, Gabrielle actually worked for Microsoft during the launch of Windows 95 and was on a team who was helping out with part of the promotion. Do you remember they had the Rolling Stones had a Start Me Up. That was the song that kicked off the conference that launched Windows 95 because I had the start menu.
Oh, mm-hmm.
That's so funny.
Yeah, I think the first programming language I learned was it was on MS-DOS, and it was QBasic, Quick Basic. I can't remember the name.
Quick Basic, yeah.
That was in high school.
But it had a debugger, like from the command line, you could launch it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you tell me to program with that right now, I probably will not remember. Not at all. Like Pascal was the second one I think that we learned. And I had to we had to build an actual like analog clock for my college project with Pascal, which was challenging.
One of my dads set me up for a life of tech. So it's always kind of hard for me to separate that out, because when I was 5 years old, he put a desktop PC in my room and his instructions were CD change directory, dir list directory, there's games on this computer. You can find them, you can play them. And that's where I started. And then just before I got formal into anything, I started doing little things like I figured out on graphing calculators. It's basically basic. So if you can program that, we were allowed to use them on our test for calculus. So I programmed it to do all my quadratic equations and all my limit solving and all of my stuff from the beginning and little things like that.
Yeah, in high school, the big thing was to get an HP 48S at the time, the original, which was fully programmable. People were making like video games to play on the calculator.
I had Super Mario for my graphing calculator. I had Legend of Zelda, and I had a car racing game, which was my absolute favorite.
Wait, those were on the calculator? Man,
Yeah,
we had lame games on our calculators.
I had a car racing game on my HP 48.
You made me go into the other room and pick up a calculator, didn't you?
Oh, there it is. That's the GX. Hold on, get mine.
That got me through engineering school. That's what 200, 300 bucks would buy you in 95.
Yep. There you go. Someone broke my SX and had to buy me my brother, Clayton, broke my SX and bought me a GX to replace it because they didn't make the SXs anymore.
I don't know if this even has batteries in it. Yep, it does. Wonder if it turns on.
Mine's on. Mine will work.
Yep.
We're having mine says warning, low battery though.
Wow, I should take the batteries out so they don't leak. HP made such good electronics.
All right, well, thanks for everyone kind of sharing and introducing yourselves. It's nice to kind of get to know everyone a little bit virtually since we can't be face-to-face. And we're gonna go ahead and start getting started here. So welcome to everyone who's maybe new to either Women Who Code or IndyPy or both. We put together, we have 4 really awesome speakers that are going to talk about topics related to Python. We've got a pretty wide spectrum of topics and they're all really interesting. I'm really excited to hear about them. So the way the format for this is going to work, we're going to do 10 minutes each for each speaker, although we're not going to be like super strict about it, just about 10 minutes. And then we'll leave 5 minutes between each if anyone has any questions. So go ahead when the presentations are going on, make sure that you're muted. And then when we do questions, if you want to unmute to ask any questions you might have, and we can do that for a little bit. Then we've also got a lot of time at the end if you want to continue to ask more questions, or if you want to just chat. We've got kind of some of those icebreakers again if people just kind of want to chat and share stories. So we can do that there at the end. But thank you all for coming. It's a great turnout so far. So our first speaker today is Chrissy, and she's going to talk about getting involved in open source. So I'll let her take over the screen sharing from here. And if you want to do a more formal introduction.
Yes, I will. All right, so my name, I'm going to talk about contributing to open source. I'm Chrissy Wainwright. I am a senior Python developer at 6 Feet Up, though I work from home in Arkansas. I was actually supposed to be there this week for a thing at work, so I was going to be actually there present if we were doing everything in person. I used to live in Noblesville, so I am familiar with the area and everything. I'm the Plone Foundation president. And to give you some background on the Plone Foundation, it's a nonprofit organization that supports the Plone content management system, which is an open source project that is built with Python. And I'll be referring to the Plone Foundation a lot throughout this talk because that's what I'm the most familiar with. So just really quick, what is open source for any of you that aren't familiar? It's product code that is publicly available. Now, a product could be a full content management system. It could be a tutorial like the Django Girls tutorial that teaches you how to build a blog. It could be an app, or it could even just be a single file. This will usually come with a license, like you'll hear GPL license, MIT, BSD. Basically, these give you permission to remix and or redistribute the content. And then each one has, you know, some slight differences. You'll find the code repositories like in GitHub, Bitbucket, other sites like that. And larger open source projects have their own community. So Python has a community and it's open source. Django, Plone, and other ones such as that. So why get involved in open source? For one, it's a great way to get to know people. Through the Plone community, I've gotten to know lots of people from all over the world, like pretty much every continent except Antarctica. You get a really good sense of community, getting involved, getting to know other people, you know, seeing them online, seeing them in person, and then seeing the work that you contribute, being able to help others, and, you know, just seeing that later, like, oh, hey, I helped with that project. You know, it's a nice feeling. So first, I'm going to cover different ways that you can contribute. I've kind of given my own star rating as far as a difficulty level for each of these, but it's a little bit arbitrary as well. I'm going to kind of run through these quickly, but I'll post the slides later. So one thing you can do is just verify bugs, like go into the issue tracker, look at bugs that have been reported, see if you can reproduce them. You can go back, ask the original person what operating system they were on, try to get more details for the people that will actually be working on the issues, you know, whether or not that's you. It's always great to have more information on that. To go with that, doing ticket triage is also very helpful. Like if you need to add tags to the tickets, assign the tickets or tag a specific person that you think is going to be the one that will work on that. Link to any related issues or close any tickets that are invalid, especially if it's spam. And with all of these, it's always very helpful to add more comments. The more information is better for the person that's going to be eventually working on the ticket. Answering questions. I put 2 stars on this just because it's going to require a little bit more knowledge of the product, whatever it is that you are helping out with. So whether that is on a community forum, on Stack Overflow, or IRC, if anyone is still on there, it's always helpful to have people answering questions that newcomers are asking. Beta testing is also very helpful, making sure that the next upcoming release is going to work for everyone. Monetary donations, that's an easy one, always helpful as well. Documentation is another one. So there are 3 kinds of documentation. Generally, especially on larger projects, you're going to have end user documentation. So people learning just how to use the product. There's documentation for the core developers and anyone doing custom development for information for how to get it up and running. How to actually contribute, you know, which branch to use and all that. And then there's also documentation like training materials, similar to end user documentation, but usually provides a nice walkthrough of everything. Many projects don't, you know, especially ones that were just thrown up on GitHub, don't have any documentation. So having something there can be really helpful. Also translation. So like the products themselves will have text that needs to be translated, but then also documentation for getting started will need translations. And then there's also upkeep on languages. So if a product has been translated into multiple languages, new features are added, you know, you continually are going to need more translations added for all of those features. Small things, this one's an easy one, editing, fixing typos. If you're looking through documentation, you see some really big typos or just instructions that are completely wrong. You know, that's something that you can go in, fix that, contribute that fix. Also going through and updating documentation that was written by someone that English was not their primary language. For those of us that do speak English, it's really easy to read, but to someone else that has a different primary language than the person who wrote it, it can get, it's not as clear. So having that documentation cleaned up by someone who is a native English speaker can be really helpful for everyone. And also any glaring typos you see, I would say don't get too picky, like don't go in and fix all of the British spellings of words that have extra U's and S's instead of Z's, just leave those aren't a big deal. Then writing code. This is probably the most obvious one, that what people think of with contributing to open source. So getting started with that, you may need to sign a contributor agreement depending on the project. You'll get in, look at the issues. There are going to be like beginner tasks. There are some big bug fixes. You may have ideas for new features, back end. If it's a website, you also have like a front end. The rating I gave on this 3 stars, I mean, that's really a range. Some things may be easier. Some tasks may be more difficult, but especially getting started, the whole process can be a little bit daunting. So that's also why I gave that a more difficult rating. You can also contribute by working at a conference booth. So the Plone Foundation, we have a booth at PyCon every year, and that's another way that you can help out so that you don't have just one person stuck at the booth the whole time. Once again, 2 stars on that, just because that's going to require a little bit more knowledge about the product to be able to talk to people about it. In larger communities, there are a lot of teams. So like, this is a list of the few of the teams that we have in the Plone Foundation. Some of these meet every other week, and volunteers are needed because the people that we have that are already working on these teams, they're busy, and it's hard to keep up with everything. So more people that can get involved, it's always better. You can also open source your own project. So like if you have a whole project, or maybe just a script, put it out on GitHub, keep it updated, release different versions. I mean, all of this is going to help you understand the process of open source without feeling like you're messing up someone else's stuff. Okay, so now I've gone over the different ways you can contribute, but how can you actually get started and get involved? First of all, I want to warn you, don't be afraid of failure. Just tell you up front, it's going to happen. You may have a pull request that's rejected. You may give the wrong answer to a question. Just take it as a learning experience and keep moving forward. If there's a community forum, hop in there and introduce yourself. You can ask some questions, answer some questions, and get involved in discussions. It's always helpful to have other points of view. Submit pull requests. So, look at the issues, fix some stuff, commit some code. Sometimes it can be tricky to remember all of the steps that need to be done with a pull request. So, make sure that you're reading what the community expects. Some things that I see a lot: update to the changes of the history file. Make sure you are writing and updating any tests. Make sure they all pass. And merge in any newer changes that have been implemented since you started writing your code, fix any conflicts. Whatever makes it easier for the person who is actually going to merge it later is best. I remember some pull requests may get rejected. Maybe you forgot some things, and it may sound like the people on the other end are cranky when they say, oh, you missed this or you didn't do this. But generally they are grateful for having someone that is helping. Also know that not all features, ideas that you have will be accepted. Towards the end of the talk, I have a link to a keynote from PyCon a couple years ago where the presenter mentions that features can be like a puppy that the maintainer doesn't want. So just keep that in mind when you are submitting new things. Get involved by attending a meetup or a conference. I mean, you're already all here at a meetup, but meeting other people face-to-face and getting to put a face to the name of the people that you see online all the time is great, getting to know them. If you don't have a particular project that you know that you want to contribute to, there are different ways of finding projects. Codetriage.com has a whole list. Also on GitHub has some tips, and First Timers Only also has plenty of tips for just the whole process of getting started and getting involved. Finally, I have just a few more tips of how to act in an open source community. The first one is be helpful. I mean, obviously you are showing up, you want to try to help, but do it in a helpful way. If you have something to complain about, try to do it positively. Don't just go on the forum and complain about things, but if something's broken, submit an issue about it, put in details about that. Provide other options like a workaround if you have it, or just start a discussion if you don't know what needs to happen. Remember that many open source maintainers are working for free. Give credit where credit is due if someone helps you. And then here's the link to that video that Brett Cannon gave at PyCon a couple of years ago. It talks about the struggles of open source maintainers. So next I will open it up for questions.
Awesome. That was a really great talk. I think for me, I've been programming a long time, but I think I'd be still intimidated. I always think of getting involved with open source as like writing code. So I really thought it was interesting the way you're bringing up these other ways that you can help out, like changing documentation or fixing those kind of errors. That's not something I would have thought about before. That's very cool. And don't be afraid to be wrong, which is always helpful to hear. So yeah, if anyone else wants to unmute for a sec, if anyone has any questions, feel free to hop in.
Looks like there are 2 questions in the chat.
Oh, yeah, I forgot to check the chat. How do you go about picking an open source project? So I hope that was answered by a slide there at the end. And I will post my slides. I'll get that link in the meetup.
I have one more comment to that. Quite a little bit of a question I know a lot about. But I think, and this came up actually in a podcast I was watching, listening to earlier this week, that you will get a lot of biased recommendations if you ask folks for like what kind of open source projects that you should get involved in. And I think you really need to find something that like hits a passion that you are already excited about, like whether it's like home automation or home theater or some. I mean, there's probably an open source project that handles some thing you just have a strange desire to be involved with. You should probably seek that out. Or this is what I recommend to people, and I try to keep it non-biased, is if you use a commercial product, try and find the licenses page for that commercial product and see what open source projects that they are building their product on. So if you're using like this is an old example, but if you're using a TiVo, they had a license page. If you're using Apple, you can go to apple.com/open source, and it will list off every open source project that product is built on, and find something there.
Yeah, it's not something I've ever thought of about like going out and finding one to support. And it's always something, maybe it's something I'm already using and I see a bug in it and I want to fix the bug. So I look at how I can do that, or at least submit an issue about it and make sure that the details are there. And then there was another question. Oh, Calvin, that was you. How has GitHub changed the way we engage?
You said, oh, Calvin, like that was a bad thing.
No, I did not. Well, yeah. Anyway, how has GitHub changed the way we engage with open source projects? So, I mean, throughout the time that I've been with the Plone community, we have since moved to GitHub. We had a separate issue tracker that everything was over there. I think moving that to GitHub, it made it a lot easier because a lot of developers were already on GitHub. It made them easier to get in and get started using a tool that they were already familiar with. And then, it's very maintained, it's updated quite a bit as opposed to the previous issue tracker that we had been using, so you weren't going to get any new features. It was just going to be the same thing that you had. So yeah, moving everything over, I think was a big help.
And the other bit on that one is I think that the fact you can fork a repository and submit pull requests is a huge benefit to new people. They don't have to feel like they're going to break the project by committing into the main code of the project. Like you can do whatever you want, and the worst thing that's going to happen is someone rejects your pull request.
Yeah, or I have a script. Like I have a script that uploads my photos to Flickr automatically. That I found it on GitHub. I created a fork and I put my own changes in that, I'm not even going to submit those back to the original person. I'm just using mine, but it's available on GitHub, so anyone can go use the one that I'm using.
I think there's one more question that just popped in. How do you create your own open source project and let people know about it? It's in the chat.
It's kind of funny, even if you don't let people know about it, I wrote 2 packages for a previous job. One's just an obscure thing in Python of formatting for ZPL2 language, that's zebra label printers and stuff. And it winds up 10 or 12 people are starting to use it and, feed different stuff to it. And I feel bad because I don't maintain it anymore, but I accept pull requests and go in. But it's weird how people go on GitHub and search for that and find it just by that. you know, with no
Yeah,
other
make sure it
code.
has details about
Yeah.
what it does.
And I had, you know, I had README, CI/CD set up, Travis, you know, decent, you know, testing and things, which helps. As anybody that's going to
look at it.
Yeah. And when you're looking at all the different projects to take, you'll look at which one seems the most mature, and that's usually what people will do. So you want to spend some time, and it's easy for a lot, like cookie cutter package in Python allows you to, you know, there's a lot of ways to get it easily done at first, but looking good with decent documentation puts you ahead of 90% of the projects.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Chrissy. That was really interesting. I'll go back to Sharon here. There we go. And so our next speaker today is Amrutha, and she's got, her topic is a baby guide to Python. So if you want to take over and introduce yourself, and I don't know where she's at there. I don't know if we
Can you
lost.
guys
Oh, there.
hear me?
Oh, yep, I can hear you. I don't see you, but oh, there you are.
Can you guys hear me? Yeah, I just got kicked off of my Wi-Fi, and so now I am on my hotspot.
Okay.
And then I got kicked out of the Zoom, back into it. So hopefully I can like last a connection for 10 minutes at least.
Yeah.
So I'm just gonna turn off my video to save. Jessica, could you make me a co-host again? I think
Yeah.
because I got kicked.
Oh, it didn't go through. Okay, I'll try it again. I'm trying to.
While we wait, I'll just give you guys a background, my background. I currently work as a data scientist at KSM. I've had a pretty non-traditional path to tech, but I've been in it for about 5 years now. For my very first job after I graduated grad school, I just looked for job descriptions that mentioned SPSS because that's what I had used in school. And I found my first job at a market research company. Okay.
I've invited you, but it doesn't seem to be working. I don't know why.
I looked. It looks like she's a co-host. I couldn't find, like, sometimes when you log or get kicked off, there's 2 accounts on there, but it looks like you should be able to present.
Okay, let me try again.
I think if you, yeah, and also I think if Jessica, if you stop sharing, she will be able to share.
I can stop.
Okay. Yeah, it just says the host has disabled attendee screen sharing.
Yeah, try it now.
Okay. All right, we have slides.
Awesome.
All right. So yeah, I was starting off with my background. So that's how I first got into tech. And then while I was there, my first exposure to Python was with natural language processing. We used a vendor at the company where we had manual coders who would read comments, the survey comments, and then categorize them into buckets. And so when I worked there, as you can imagine, I'm not a very patient person, so I didn't take to the task very well. And I just, I got to work a little bit on the keyword extraction and the automation of that. But when I worked there, I actually just helped developers understand what the user's needs were, but I didn't write any code, didn't touch it. I just kind of read it and helped them with the specifications. And it was when I was there I just kind of felt in a way stunted because it seemed like the developers around me got to be really creative and make things, and I kind of just could tell them what to do. But in a way, it just kind of felt empowering if I could also write the language itself. After that, it's going to sound like I've had a lot of random jobs, but it's just the truth. I've had a lot of random jobs. I worked at a healthcare startup doing data management and quality assurance, where yet again, I did a lot of manual work and I kind of prized myself in automating some of that. And back to today, I work for KSM. We're a consulting company, and I build machine learning models or visualizations for clients specifically in healthcare. So some of the work I've done for clients is to understand the social determinants of health. So things like congestive heart failure and infant mortality, for example. A lot of our healthcare clients, typically hospitals or clinics, they have done extensive research on the medical side of things. And I just kind of help them understand the other data sets as well. And for now, I have the not so fun task of looking at COVID-19 data. And it's a great experience, but also depressing at times. So this is gonna seem like a pretty random presentation, and maybe it is, but what I chose to do is kind of explain how I got started with Python and also just kind of give you some random life advice, because that's what everyone wants at 7 p.m. is random life advice. So first thing, when I started out trying to learn Python, I knew absolutely nothing apart from looking at the language in some scripts. So what I actually did was reach out to a friend who, in my opinion, knew everybody in the city, and I asked him to introduce me to some people. And it's a lot for me. I'm pretty introverted, and so he set me up with some folks who worked at High Alpha, and then I just picked their brains on what tools they were using, what tools they were looking for someone who wanted to get into data science. And I just wrote a list, and they told me things like, look at pandas, look at Python, look at NumPy, look at scikit-learn, kind of train yourself more in statistics. So after bugging those people, I kind of set aside some time every week. And I was very religious about it. I think I got this from my dad, who wakes up at like 5 a.m., writes for 2 hours, and then goes to his regular job. And then after that, this is where I handpicked a few resources that I found really helpful. So the first one, as is mentioned in the intro for this talk, is a book called Python in 24 Hours. So it may seem kind of random that I chose to buy a book to learn how to code, but I think everyone learns differently, and I'm the kind of person who always has a book in her purse. So like if I'm in a waiting room or on the bus for too long, I can kind of read something. And working on it, and then
I think we're starting to lose a little bit there.
Do my exercises that week and just be really, really.
Uh-oh. I think we lost your audio. I don't know if you can still hear us, but
I can
yeah, I can still hear you guys.
Okay.
Oh,
yeah, I can hear everybody else.
You came back.
All right. Sorry about that. If I maybe. But has a really kind of go through some of the basics, and let's hope this doesn't load or does load. If it doesn't, then we can always just share slides later. And I just kind of keep this handy all the time. It'll kind of give you some guidance on like what kind of jobs there are in data science, but also go over the basics of a lot of machine learning models like probability, hypothesis testing, and even some visualizations. I do know a lot of people who just kind of throw data at a model and think it's going to work well. It'll work probably, but you should know like what tests to use when. Let me go back to my deck. One of my favorites actually is this resource from Delft University of Technology. They're all Jupyter notebooks that go over the basics of Python, and so you get it's kind of a textbook and the Jupyter notebook, so you can interact with the questions. Really great. I probably should launch Jupyter just to kind of show you what that is like. Give me 1 second. We'll just pick the most simple one. But this is one of the first lessons. So we'll kind of go over the basics of like how to use Jupyter Notebook, how to declare variables, how to print them, how to
If you're
multiply.
trying to show something, we're still seeing your display or your
We're still seeing your
presentation.
slide.
All right, how about now?
Perfect.
All right.
Bingo,
Sorry,
looks
tech failures, folks. All right, so this is one of my favorite resources, but you can work with Jupyter Notebook. You'll kind of get lessons about it as well as you can interact with it. So it'll teach you how to declare variables, what they are, how to print them. It does actually get far more complex, but it'll actually give you the problem and you can try and solve it. The even better thing is if you do need to kind of look at the solution workbook, it's all there for every single example. You can obviously, there are more advanced things like root finding, how to make functions, basic regression and hypothesis testing, like I mentioned before. So I'm gonna go back to my presentation if it will allow me to. All right, do you guys see my presentation again?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. So after you've kind of learned the basics, this is something I recommend is find a small problem. So you'll get that in the kind of tutorials you'll go through. This is one of them from the Python in 24 Hours book. So it's just creating a program to take a student's name and then record their grade, and then using a dictionary and a key value pair to record that information and store it, obviously. I also took a lot of random classes in college. And so from that, I kind of learned that, like, I really do believe that if you do love coding and you went to school for computer science, it's really nice to take an art class and learn something from that discipline. And I kind of use that approach to how I do work as well. So there's a lot I learned from working with manufacturing companies 3 to 4 years ago that is actually very applicable to the healthcare industry now. So going back to this example of creating a program to record a student's name and their grade, I ended up making something after I had a kid just to record the date, the food I fed him, and whether he liked or disliked it. And I had to sneak him into this, so here he is. And then this is kind of like once you've learned the basics, once you've kind of solved some problems that the book will tell you is a real world example, it can, at least this is where I got frustrated that I couldn't apply that to what I was doing. So wherever you're at, my advice is to find something that really bugs you. For me, it was all of the very manual tasks that were very time consuming and weren't really a good use of anyone's time. Like even the manual coders at my old company would have preferred to do something rather than reading comments every hour of the day. So while we worked there, something that frustrated us, and I'll go over this quickly because you do not need the details, was just the time it took to do a text classification model versus a regression model with some of the survey data that was already coded for us, pretty well structured. And so we kind of just took the idea of figuring out what was in the manual coder's head, like the logic they would use, making a rule set from that, applying it to all our existing data, and then training a model from it so that we could use it with the future data. And we didn't take the manual coders' jobs away. We just let them do what the model wasn't as confident in, or if it needed tuning, that's kind of what their focus became, rather than just spending hours just to simply put something like your broccoli smells like farts into a negative category. And that is actually like an actual comment for a food distributor. Something else I recommend is approaching the same problem differently. So when I run into issues, I run to Stack Overflow almost immediately. But I think as you're working through code, if you see something that someone else has suggested as a fix, use it for sure, but try to see if there's another way to optimize it. this was really helpful for me, was just finding someone who was at my same level trying to learn Python. And there are so many networking groups in Indy that I'm really sure you'll find someone who's on the same skill level who wants to kind of advance with you. As someone who works with a lot of machine learning, I did this very recently. I built a model. I was really proud of it. And then my consultant asked me, well, what are they supposed to do with this? And I had all these metrics that I was really proud of, and they really kind of put me in my place to be like, you have to think of it as the consumer of this data. How can it be useful? So I think with any program or any line of code, don't just think about how it can be useful for you, but how other people who are going to interact could use it. Generally ask for feedback. And this also means like if you're teaching yourself something and you cannot figure it out, reach out to some Slack groups. I think I'm a part of both IndyPy and Indy Hackers, and I'm really not afraid to just ask someone for help if there's someone who's more seasoned with it and can help me out. And that really is it. I think I may have spoken too quickly, and I hope you guys heard all of it. If not, I'll share the slides soon. So does anyone have questions?
Yeah, we heard most of it. There was a couple parts where it came out, but I think a lot of it came through. And I really liked your comment about like getting coffee with someone who has a job, has your dream job. That's a really cool idea. Although I imagine it might be hard sometimes to find someone who has your dream job, but if you can.
Yeah.
I saw that someone asked in the questions, oh, it was Calvin. I mean,
wait. Come on.
Well, because you can speak for yourself. I don't need to speak for you. If you want to ask a question.
You got to rephrase it. Oh, it was Calvin.
Oh.
Right. It's all about intonation. It's all about it's all about phrasing.
I'm sorry.
So actually, I had a question because I know one of the tricky bits for new users getting started is going to be, how do you even get like those Delft notebooks started and working? There's Python packaging is a sorted history, and as a person who instructs folks on how to use Python, even I haven't quite figured out the best way. And I want to know from someone who's kind of started it from scratch in a, sounds like a fairly recent fashion, like how did you get the Delft notebooks working?
So the first time I needed to do something, I had like no idea what packages were or like what Jupyter Notebook was. And so when I worked at the startup, I actually had the data scientist that worked at the company kind of help me set things up. Delft, and I do think there are some other resources on like how to install both Anaconda and Jupyter Notebook effectively. But like I had like very humble beginnings. I didn't quite know the difference between like installing something and importing it. I just thought like once it's in, like I thought importing was the same. As stupid as that may sound to the rest of you. So
I don't think that sounds stupid at all. I think that there is a lot of people who have the same concerns and are just afraid to say it. And I think it's great that you're here talking about it.
So for me, I think I was lucky in anywhere I've worked, and maybe this is also my personality. I'm really fine with looking like a failure if it can help me be a little better like in the next 10 minutes of the next day. So my advice there is to find that Python peer, find someone in your company who, even if they don't code in Python, may have experience installing things on computers and getting programs set up.
I've got one comment and one question. The one thing I see with beginning Python stuff, they often want you to just use a basic text editor or something. And I really think PyCharm, the free version, did more for me writing Python well, but it also allows you to create virtual environments and load packages very seamlessly and also run Juniper notebooks. So something like that, I think, can make it actually easier to start up than just going with idle or any of the text stuff. If you're doing the actual programming, I think any of the interfaces for Juniper notebooks work great for data. The question I was going to ask is, are there major blockers you saw in learning that were hard to get past, or that more experienced people could help in any way that you can think of?
There were definitely times when I would write like even basic scripts and then like cause another problem. And I think at those times, like, it kind of helped me to know that a lot of coders experience this, and that it's like even people who are extremely experienced go to Stack Overflow. For me, it was sometimes things like like it was basic things like I would declare something within a function and then try to call it. And I didn't quite understand how all of that worked. So with things like teaching yourself, one thing I would recommend is like go to meetups. Like I know IndyPy is hosting, I think one on the 12th, right, for the basics in Python. Go to things.
Actually, the speaker's here, I think.
Just don't, while it's good to like learn by yourself, I'm definitely more of an introvert and I do like learning how to code with a book, but don't isolate yourself to that. Like go to meetups, find someone who's senior and ask for help, even if it's small.
I'll second the meetups. We are very approachable. We try to be like super, super nice to all levels. And so don't be scared of like coming in and just talking to the first person you run into when you walk in the door.
I also find it helpful to share, like when you learn something new, because I always find that even people that I expect, oh, they know all this stuff, they still learn things sometimes too. You know, I mean, we're all still learning. We can't know absolutely everything. So yeah, whenever I learn something, I always try to share it.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that presentation, Amrutha. It was really good. And if you have more questions, we'll have some more at the end as well. But I'm going to go back to, there we go. So our next speaker for the evening is Annette, and her talk is, "Hi, I'm still new here." So feel free to grab the screen whenever you're ready and introduce yourself. And
the right screen.
I think you have to release it for her to be able to
do I
grab
have
it.
to release it? Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't before. Oh yeah,
I think it let me stop. Am I sharing?
Yep, you got it.
Awesome. Okay. Let me get my window. So it's always interesting. Like I'm a major introvert. So the title of my talk, when I was asked to speak, of course, my stomach dropped to the floor because I was terrified. And I do well speaking, but doing well and being confident and actually thinking you know what you're doing is a completely different kind of thing. So even though I've been doing things for a while, I'm like, hi, I'm still new here, no matter how long I seem to be here. So yeah, hi, I'm Annette. I'm a web developer. I do internet webby things with websites. And this is kind of how I felt I introduced myself to most people. And it says quite a bit about who I am and what I'm thinking and how I put myself out into the world, because I'm subtly saying a lot of things about myself just based on that. So this is like a revise of that comment and saying, oh, people call me Annette, that's cool. Web developer, it's a general title. I can kind of hit all the different places and people hopefully won't ask me questions or too technical questions. Yeah, I program things and Python is usually the language that I'm working with. And it doesn't show a lot of confidence. It doesn't show a lot of me. And I started thinking about that more and more as I kept saying this, because I picked up my first programming book when I was 12 years old. I saw websites on the internet. I wanted to make a website too because I had passions about those things. And that was HTML, CSS. Eventually I learned PHP and stuff like that. But no matter how far I got, I was just kind of hoping I could make it. Like, I just see these grand things next to me and I never felt like I could quite measure up to that level. And whenever I start to think like, how senior is a senior developer? How junior is a junior? And you start spinning your wheels and trying to place yourself in that spectrum of the programmer world. And I'm just like, okay, stop, take a moment, take a deep breath, and just kind of start thinking. So I usually like to go back to my path of becoming a programmer, which is incredibly non-traditional. So as I said, my first initial interest is I wanted to make a website. I wanted something on the internet. And then I got a bachelor's, completely unrelated. It's in pre-medicine. But I lived on the IT floor next to all the programmers. So they kind of kept me going. We could talk about different stuff that they were learning in class. I could understand what they were saying. I volunteered and did a couple projects here and there. I was still doing stuff, but I wasn't on that path. Then I got a master's. It's in biomedical science, even more unrelated. But in my spare time, I was still doing websites. I actually was learning PHP first and basically said, I have a huge library of books and I keep going to the store and buying the same volume and issues of these books. So I made myself a problem and I said, I'm going to learn this language and I'm going to learn how to do that. And that was just while I was doing my education and going on. And then I got a job. I was hired to do the thing, not in medicine at all. And actually, I had the odd jobs in between. I was a pharmacy technician. I worked at a hotel front desk. And then I started working at a major university doing websites. I was comfortable with that. And they're just like, it's in Plone and it's going to be Python. And I was like, oh my gosh, I know neither of that. And that was back in 2013. But they believed in me and I figured I'd hold on and fake it till I make it. So I started doing that and I was like, okay, I'm in this field. This is actually a career path now. This is not just me getting money. This is me starting to do something that I'd been doing for pretty much all my life, but at a professional level. But I never kind of felt professional. But then finally a chance to upgrade in that job came by. And I got to apply for another job that was actually more specified to that field. And that was like lead developer in my office for Plone and Python stuff. And I think that's when I really started feeling, okay, I can do this because I was the lead developer. I got to make a lot more of the choices. I didn't have to worry about stepping on other people's feet. It gave me a different type of feeling. But even then, I didn't have peers in my office. So I didn't necessarily have people to talk to. So I still felt like I was just trying to stay afloat. So even though I'd been working in this office for a year or two now, I still felt really new and just didn't feel like I knew what I was doing. But I was producing work and I was still continuing on. And then I got another job, which is my job now, because I guess they believe in me even more. And this one is the most specific, most tunneled one yet, where I'm actually hired to do Plone and Python development, and I've been working a lot more in it. And just working more, it's a lot of fun, and I've really been enjoying it. But even then, I'm with so many senior developers that I feel new because I've jumped into yet a new environment again. So my TLDR with my checks and misses, and it's kind of 50-50 of where I ended up in life, programmer versus all the other things I did. And I started to think, why am I like this? Why am I always, I kind of putting myself down. Why don't I just say I'm a programmer, I'm a developer, this is what I do. I keep saying I'm new, I just started, and I'm kind of sheepish. And so I like to, at that moment, once again, start asking myself some questions. And I kind of got like a check myself list. What am I afraid of? What do I think my shortcomings are? And what are the strengths that I can use to overcome them? I think I'm young and inexperienced. I'm always going to think that. And that's because in any programming language, there's so much that you can learn, and there's so many people that you can learn from. I felt like I wasn't focused from the beginning because I took such a windy path. And I felt like I didn't have a lot of streamlined time just focusing in one path to feel that, oh, this is what I do all the time. And most important, and it's like circles back to this, I didn't think I could be interesting enough for anyone to think, oh yeah, she knows what she's doing. So then I realized once again, I was only slowing myself down because by undervaluing myself, I wasn't doing as much work as I could. By underselling myself, I wasn't selling myself to other people and giving myself opportunities. And I was just blocking myself from doing anything further. So then what I realized more than anything was the community was not that scary. And I went to a couple meetups at the university I worked at. I went to the Plone conference. I've gone to other tech conferences. And the first thing I learned is, even though I thought I didn't know that much, when I started talking to people, we always had things that we could teach each other. And I was just interested learning from them as they were interested in learning from me. So just even the little projects that I gave myself to do, I just kind of explained and I was, oh, that's really cool. And that's how you can start learning even more things, especially when it comes to some of the jargon I didn't know, because I learned most of my Python just kind of on the internet. I think I learned a lot of Code Academy, and a lot of it was just reading and comprehension and saying, if I change the S in this variable to an F, this is the chain of things that I broke. But now I know this is a chain of things that I can read. And that kind of exploration and bringing that to my peer groups and talking to them taught me so much of the jargon and the lingo and just all the little things that I could use to learn more to be able to do my job. And then the internet is a mean place, but there's just as many people out there willing to help that are willing to hurt you. So asking questions, getting on Stack Overflow, finding that IRC channel, getting on GitHub, any of those things, posting your own code, they're all learning experiences. And once I started thinking about that more and more, I felt that I had more time learning than being intimidated and feeling like I wasn't so new because I was just learning. So my next step was to build myself back up and, you know, learn a thing, do the thing, and learn more things to do. So basically I would take a miniature project and just say, okay, I'm going to learn to make this task. And whether it's like, I need to display this thing on the page, great, it's there. Now I need to display this thing on the page, depending on what I'm doing, and just kind of expanding and building the functionality out. And then I'd realize that I'd have a full suite. So now I'm doing the thing. And now that I've got that thing established, I could do even more things. And I could immerse myself, I could ask questions, and I could find something to do on my own. And coming from this, one of the biggest things that I learned is that blank slates are terrifying. Opening VS Code or PyCharm or just a blank notepad and saying, I'm going to write some code today, is a quick way for me to want to shut my lid and walk away. But finding something that already exists and saying, I'm going to add a feature to this, or I'm going to make this better, allowed me to have a working product that I actually added on and expanded on. And that helped me build up myself, my confidence, and just my experience more than anything else. So how I'm fixing this now and how I'm improving this is just telling myself I've been making it fine through life so far. If I really wasn't a developer or a program, I think somebody would have told me by now and I wouldn't have any of the jobs that I had. But I still want to be more than that. And that's my opportunity to build myself up. I've been doing myself the biggest injustice by undervaluing myself and underselling myself, and I wasn't going to get better. So now I'm going to get better, and I'm not going to hide behind the fact of I'm still new, because I've been doing this long enough that I can keep moving forward, and I'm just going to keep learning and keep improving myself. And now I'm going to thread that fine line between confidence and bragging, because the difference is just how you market yourself to others. So now I'm going to start over. I'm a programmer, and I don't need to quantify this at this point. I am a programmer. I'm a developer. And so I'm Annette Lewis. I'm a web developer that works with 6 Feet Up, and I work with Plone and Python. I previously worked at a major university developing Plone and Python sites for a very long time. I also have a lot of experience with HTML, theming, and front end with some experience in JavaScript. It's nice to meet you. And do you have any questions?
Awesome. Thank you so much for, yeah, there's some quite applause. Thank you so much for talking, even though, like you said, you felt a little nervous about the opportunity, because I think you're speaking to something that almost everyone I've talked to who's been in this field grapples with, is like, when do you get to own the title of a developer or a programmer? It feels like there's always so much more to learn when you get to officially say, well, I have crossed that threshold and I am this now. And
yeah,
I really appreciated what you had to share. So I don't know if anyone else has any questions or comments or thoughts.
I put a question in the chat, but I'll go ahead and ask it. since I can do that. How did you overcome your natural state of introversion to go put it out there and participate?
One of the biggest things that I do is, even though I want to say no, I don't always say no. And some of that, maybe I call myself, I have a nice face. I'm one of those people that when you're on the street, I smile and I always get asked for directions. And even if it makes me uncomfortable and my pit of my stomach drops out, which it's somewhere in the basement right now, quite honestly, I just say, you know what, I'm gonna try it. I'm gonna try it. And I'm usually pretty upfront about it. Said, I'm not 100% confident I can do this, but I'm gonna give it a go. And the best thing is to kind of set yourself a limit, because not everything I'm gonna be able to do. And that's okay. It's okay to fail. It's okay to ask questions. It's okay to fall short. What's most important is giving that effort to start and then knowing when you need to go find help. And I really think that's the biggest thing about anything that I do. So with that in my mind, I say, okay, let's just jump in, and I'll be screaming all the way through, but at least I would have tried it.
So you mentioned resting nice face, which was one of my most favorite and most memorable lightning talks from the Plone conference in 2016.
It was the keynote. She gave the keynote at the Plone conference. And so, yeah, I was wondering about that. I mean, just having kind of that imposter syndrome and being asked to do a keynote. How did you feel at that time?
I was floored. And that is definitely one of the, like, I went to the Plone users group, and once again, I didn't have peers and I didn't have guidance, but I had stuff I needed to get done for my job. And we had specific clients we needed to please. And I just started hacking together solutions. And I brought those cool solutions to the Plone users group. And I said, oh, these are all the crazy things that I did to make these sites work together. Thinking that, you know, it was dead space and we needed to fill it. And these Python people are so pro, they're not going to be interested. But I remember one person turned around and said, what, you did that all through the web? And just like, yeah, isn't that how you do it when you're not doing it the other way? And he looked astonished. And that was kind of like the beginning of that, where I realized I was doing something kind of strange, something kind of different, but it was still interesting. And even though I had only been working with the system, I started in 2003 and that was 2016. So 3 years in the first year, I definitely didn't know what I was doing. So 2 years of probably actual work that I kind of had a direction on, but people were interested. And it was a confidence boost. And I think that is really why I like to speak to people and tell them, don't hide, because I was in that room, the front of a room, a lecture hall, talking to people who were well beyond me in experience in years, but they were genuinely interested, and people asked questions, and people were asking me questions all throughout the weekend. And the lightning talk I gave on how to be an empathetic designer and developer, I was specifically asked to do by one of the people who was asking me questions. Awesome. I'm like finally reading the comment.
I was gonna say there's a lot of really great stuff in the chat there. Well, thank you very much. That was awesome.
Thank you.
Let me. I'm gonna grab the screen here. And I don't know if you guys are gonna be able to hear my daughter hollering in the background, but she's having a fun time out there. And our fourth and final speaker of the evening is Alyssa, and she's going to be talking about Stumbling Beyond the Tutorials, A Beginner's Adventures with PyGamer. So if you want to take over the screen and introduce yourself. I think. Yeah, I'll stop sharing just in case that makes it easier.
If I do that, hopefully you can see the first slide, maybe.
Yeah, try again.
Share screen, try this. You listen to this? Okay, now the thing popped up.
Yep.
So hopefully you can see it. Okay. And I need to get rid of that. Okay, so like it says on the slide, my name's Alyssa Batula. So I am a Python programmer. I'm also our second data person, apparently, of the speakers, but I came kind of the other direction where I was a kind of on the engineering side and then came into the data. But my talk has nothing to do with any of that. So in addition to liking Python, I like video games. And I have never made a video game before. I've never wanted to make one. I just like to play them. Until one day I decided I do in fact want to try and make a video game. So I'm going to tell you about that and what happened when I had no idea what I was doing and I reached the end of the tutorials. So a good starting place is, what is the PyGamer, or its close cousin, the PyBadge? So these are boards that you can get on Adafruit, and you can program them with CircuitPython. So like a smaller version of Python. It doesn't have all of the features, but it has some additional features for like buttons and interfacing and stuff like that. So I mean, you get this board, it comes with a display built in, it's got buttons, it's really easy to plug in a battery and even a speaker. So you can use them for name badges at events, but the more fun for me is that you can put little kind of retro style games on them. So I got one, I decided it was cool, and was like, hey, I wonder if I can make my own game. And the inspiration for this was actually some of my coworkers. They all really like Java and C#, and there's not much love for Python. And so I just wanted to make a silly game about how Python is better than the other languages. And so I started doing this, and then I ran into a problem somewhat quickly, is that there's lots of tutorials available, and in true Adafruit fashion, they're great tutorials, except most of them are for this thing called Make Code Arcade. So it's kind of a Scratch style block programming where you put all the blocks together to program this device. And so it's cool, but it's not Python. I can't write a game about how Python is better in any language other than Python. So at the end of those tutorials, they're like, and you can do it in Python, and here's a couple of examples. But they ended before actually making a game. And I couldn't find much on the internet for like how to make an actual game out of this Python code. And so, kind of related to the first talk, part of the reason for this talk is I want to help anyone else who might be in my spot of like, oh, I can't find anything. And so I put together a sample code of like how you might actually make a not very good game, but how all the mechanics work, and it's out on the internet. So in the talk, I'm gonna really gloss over the code because it's out on the GitHub, and I tried to comment it pretty well if anyone wants to see it. And I'm gonna talk more about like kind of the ideas that I learned about making games. So a little more about how exactly you make a game on this PyGamer. So it comes with this display, and it's got, it's 160 pixels wide and 128 pixels high, so a little tiny screen. And almost everything you put on it is a 16 by 16 pixel. Sometimes you might call them a sprite. So you have to give it, they call it a bank of images. And so these are all of the things that will go onto the display, and you just tell it, I want image number 2 at this location on the screen, and it will put it there. So these types of images are called pixel art. And so if you're interested in the art aspect of the game, you can find resources online and make your own. If you're not as interested or you're intimidated by it, you can also get things off the internet. So like you can find people that put sprite sheets out, and you can borrow their sprites and use them in your game. So this weird pink background is actually how you make something transparent. And the first thing I found out is it's a very specific pink you have to use to make something transparent. There's a very specific color code. If you use another pink that just kind of looks like that one, it will not be transparent, and you'll have a weird pink halo around all of the things in your game. But so in this bar of images from top to bottom, and I think I can make a pointer. Nope, go back. Not time for you yet. There we go. Okay. So each of these is 16 by 16. And so we start with just the background. So you just, make a tile of backgrounds, and I wasn't feeling creative. So it's just a completely black background. And then I have 4 different images of this little purple snake. And so the way you make an animation is, like a GIF, you just image 1, then display image 2, then 3, then 4, then we go back to 1. And the reason for this little snake is that the CircuitPython mascot is Blinka. So if I'm making a game about how Python is better, the main character may as well be this adorable Python. And so these sprites I actually got from Adafruit, or at least I changed them a little bit so you can have a little like hissing movement from the snake. But yeah, I did not make these adorable sprites. So you need a main character, so that's Blinka. But you need other things in your game too, like maybe some walls. Code comments are kind of like a wall for code. And you need enemies, and I feel like semicolons are a pretty good Python enemy. And then the last bit down here is you need a goal, so let's get to the Python logo. This is not a complicated game. And if you're worried more on the pixel art about, oh, I can't do this, I'm no good at art, this is my first attempt at Blinka the Snake. Like, they're kind of cute, but there's nothing terribly impressive. This one is actually, it honestly scares me. So you should seriously consider trying it. It's kind of fun, even if you're terrible at it. There's only 16 by 16 pixels. How bad can it possibly be? But I pretty quickly got to the end of the tutorials. There's one, it's a really good tutorial. Can you see a website now, or you still see my slide?
See the website.
Okay. So it's a really cool tutorial, and it teaches you like how to put text on it, how to move and animate sprites. You've got these balls rolling around, but it's not actually a game. You're not controlling them. They just kind of like change direction every time they hit the edge of the screen. So I got to this point, and I could animate some stuff, but there's no controls, there's no enemies, you can't win or lose. Another aspect was there's no scrolling world. Like, most of the games so far had focused on things like Tetris, where you move the character within the screen, but the screen never moves. But my favorite games are always like Sonic and Mario, like they side scroll or you explore this world. So that was another thing that I then had to figure out. Like, I hadn't found anything on how to do that in Python yet either. They did have some example games with some code, but there's no real tutorials. So this is where I reached the end of things that were out on the internet that I could use. So I learned some important things. One of those is that as much as I love these devices, the files corrupt really easily. And when you decide to open the file straight off of the device and code that way and save it only on the device, you will be very, very sad when you bump it and it disconnects improperly and you've lost all of your code. It will be a very sad day. I know this for a fact. If it does corrupt, it's really easy to fix. You just like drag and drop a file back on it to get CircuitPython fixed, and then you drag your code back on, but it's only easy if you still have the code off of the device. So don't make that mistake. And the one thing that took me forever to figure out, it's slightly embarrassing how long this took me, is if you're going to move the world, your character needs to stay in the center of the screen, and everything else in the world should move instead. It took me so long, like, why? I don't know how to make the world move. How do I, tell it to move everything except the character? Well, you're trying to move the character. So yeah, that one took me a while. But some other things I figured out is button input is actually pretty easy. I was worried that this would be difficult, but there's a library, I assume it's pronounced microgame. You just ask it with this function, what buttons were pressed? And then you ask it, is a key pressed? And is that the right joypad? And if it is, you set, whatever it is you're doing to move. So here I'm just calling it DX, but button input is actually pretty easy. Another thing that was easier than I expected was, did I hit an enemy? Should my character have taken damage or have died? And there's a function for that too. It's just, there's a stage library and stage.collide. And you give it where the boundaries of your character and the boundaries of the thing you want to know if it hit, and that's it. It'll say yes or no. And so I'm mostly just showing you the code to show you that these are functions. If you want to like actually read the code, I would go into the repo. And like walls aren't too bad either. They're a little more difficult, but here's almost the exact same thing. We just need to see if it collided into the wall. And then there's like 2 more lines, because if you hit a wall, you can't just keep walking through it. So you have to kind of move your character back so it's next to it. So some of these things I thought would be difficult were not as hard as I thought they were. So yeah, that's most of what I learned. It wasn't as hard as I thought. It's like under 200 lines of code. And then what does it actually look like? Because it's a game, I have to show you the game. So this is also where I realized how difficult it is to take a picture of something that's basically a bunch of lights. But several cameras in my phone and I had some fights, and this is the best picture I got. But here's Blinka in the middle. We've got an enemy, and then the world is just surrounded by walls, so you don't go scrolling forever. And then I did manage to take a half-decent video. Oh, is it going to play? No. No, it's going to exit the presentation. All right, try this again. There we go. So if you run into an enemy, the game is over. It'll tell you that, and you have to reset it. But, like, you can kind of see how the animation works. She's just like sticking her snake tongue out as she wanders around. And if you get close enough to the goal, you win. So, like I said, it's not the world's best game. But what I was going for is to have all of the mechanics there, have something that I can show to people, or they could find on the internet if they're stuck, like, how do I make my game? Like, here's how you move your character in a world. Here's how you see if you hit an enemy or found your goal or won or lost the game. And so at the end, I just added some of the links that I found helpful. So just like more information on the PyGamer. Adafruit does have a ton of tutorials, and a lot of the Make Code Arcade ones are really good for like basic game design and learning a little bit about it. And then if you go through those and want to see my repo, I have that out there, and it has some links too. But yeah, so my hope is that anyone else who wants to design a game and also get stuck at that point, now there's some code out there that they can look at and hopefully take it like a step or two further.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for sharing that. Did you convince your coworkers about Python with the game?
No, I haven't showed them yet. I'm severely tempted. But there's a grand plan in my head that will never happen involving an end boss that is the Java logo. But I have to figure out how a Python would attack the Java first.
You have to get through the thousands of lines of source code to get to the boss, you know, the Java source code, because it's so verbose.
Oh, I like that. I like that.
It needs to be Duke hiding behind overly large names of classes.
Oh, yeah. Wait, no, that's the Kool-Aid guy. What's Duke? He's got the same kind of thing.
I think so. Actually, I do have a question. If you wanted to get a PyGamer, you can't right now because Adafruit, like usual, is sold out of them. Is there an emulator or something you can actually use on your own computer?
Well, you could use the PyGame library, right? Just on the PC. But is that? I was going to ask if that's the same.
I don't think that's the same.
Okay.
It is frustrating to Google for the PyGamer because you get a lot of PyGame results. There is an emulator for all of the Make Code stuff you can do online. It's like in a browser, so that's really cool. I haven't found a PyCode emulator. I haven't looked very hard. I did like a brief search last night. And actually, if someone finds one, I would love to know because that would have made better pictures for this talk. But yeah, it would be awesome if there were one. Maybe there is, but I haven't found it.
And there's a comment in the chat about the old Badger website, and now that's stuck in my head too. Thanks, Caitlin.
Oh no.
Mushroom.
All right, well, thank you to all of our speakers. Those were all really interesting topics, and I really enjoyed having you guys here. I really appreciate you putting them together. Anybody who wants to stick around for a little bit, you're welcome to ask more questions or we've got some icebreakers if you guys just want to chat and network for a little bit. Since we're all socially distanced, sometimes it's kind of nice to keep in touch a little bit. I would like to take a photo, if anybody is okay with having their videos on here for a sec, so we can just take one picture of everybody on there. So yeah, I'll wait a second here and see if anybody else wants to pop on and then grab it. Cool. Well, like I said, thanks a lot. Women Who Code, we're going to keep doing virtual events. We have one more event coming up in May, which is a collab in code. We're going to be doing we're going to revisit HTML and CSS. Our first one was kind of right when everything shut down, so we didn't get a lot of people coming to that, but hopefully we'll get people coming to that one. The next one, collab in codes are just a place where you can come and hang out and work. And if you want to learn the topic that we're doing, you can. If you just want to hang out and work on something that you're working on, you can do that too. It can be kind of a mix of things. So that's a nice intro one for anyone who's just kind of brand new to the web world and wants to book around on there. And we'll get into some other topics in other months. I don't know if if IndyPy wants to go ahead and talk about what you guys have coming up.
Yeah, I'll talk a little bit about it. So next week on Tuesday, so we meet the second and fourth Tuesdays of every month. The second Tuesday is going to be our mixers. So those are from 7 to 9, kind of similar to this one, where we kind of switch those up. So sometimes those are presentations, sometimes there's lightning talks like we did tonight. Sometimes they're just kind of more social things, hackathons, workshops. Svetlana's in here. She led one a couple months ago. We do lots of different types of things. So make sure you follow us on Meetup, and then you'll be able to find us on Slack and things like that through that as well, and kind of keep up with what we're doing. In terms of like big events, we do have a conference coming up, the Python Web Conf. It's 3 days, 3 tracks, completely virtual. It was planned to be virtual, right? So it was even before coronavirus stuff. We were already saying that we were going to do this. Actually, and I haven't told the Women Who Code Indy folks about this yet, but Women Who Code, the bigger organization, is a community sponsor. So all Women Who Code members get 15% off all tickets or anything like that. So if you have any questions, definitely feel free to shoot me a message either in Slack. I'm in the Women Who Code Indy Slack channel, or an email, or find me on LinkedIn or anything like that. We can definitely have a chat about that. So.
Awesome, that's exciting news.
Yeah, I feel like this was a good kind of place to kind of look at it. So.
Cool. Well, I kind of want to open it up from here. If anybody wants to stick around and chat, we can do breakout rooms, or if people have follow-up questions that they didn't get to ask. I had one question that I didn't ask earlier, which was, Amrutha, your program you made to track food preferences, have you used that at all, or have you learned anything from that data?
I used it in the beginning when he only ate like purees, and then I kind of stopped. The only thing he didn't like was Brussels sprouts with garlic in them, and I kind of wish I had separated them so I would know if it was like the Brussels sprouts or the garlic. I mean, you guys have seen him. A few of you have seen him online. He eats anything, and that's kind of why he's 33 inches tall and like 30 pounds. So the data I got is that my child has like better eating habits than I do. So
cool. Thank you for sharing. I was just kind of curious if the data ended up being interesting or fun.
Yeah, it's fun. Good maternity leave project.
So did you open source it?
No, it's just like local. There are a couple like tools that will let you do it, but I just like wanted to do it for myself. So.
Well, I know when we first started, we were all kind of talking a little bit about how long we've been in tech, or what doing some intros. If anyone didn't get a chance to and wants to introduce themselves or talk about how long they've been in tech or what their background is, we can do that. Or we've also got some icebreaker questions that Women Who Code offered that has, like one of the ones I think is kind of interesting is we've all kind of shared a little bit about what we already know, but what language do you want to learn, or are you trying to get into, or are you curious about? Because that might be something someone else in the group could be helpful with.
I know that one of the languages I'm wanting to get into is Angular. At Kinsey, we learn React in our second quarter for our kind of front-end web framework, and was kind of interested to see kind of how Angular works in things versus React.
I'm curious how everyone's doing working from home now. Almost.
That depends on who you are, right? Like, I love being with people, and this working from home thing is for the birds. But my co-founder of my company, who's also my wife, loves it to death. Like, we sit like 20 feet from each other all day long, and I'm just like, oh man, I can't wait to get back to the office. She's just like, can we stay like this forever?
I started a new job February of 2019, 100% remote, global team. And so other than all the extra work for doing the schooling and stuff, it's been same old, same old. We actually started sawing what was happening, and we started shutting in late February. But ironically, I think everything that we were sick with through the middle of February was actually COVID already. So I think we've all been through it.
Yes.
I've actually been working from home for about 10 years now. So for me, it was kind of strange that everyone's like talking so much about it or asking how to do it or all this stuff, because it's been a very, like, it's been part of my everyday life for a very long time now. I'm very familiar with the groove.
Yeah, me too. It's been about 10 years. I actually gave a talk at IndyPy once. I've never physically been to an IndyPy, but I gave a talk remotely about working remotely once.
What I want to know is, Drew, are you actually going someplace, or are you in your car to escape the house so you can listen to the talk?
All right, question number one, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so on Bluetooth with my phone mounted to my dashboard, I've got a coworker who lives 45 minutes away who's helping me with my first Mother's Day gift for my wife. So I had one, go buy a bottle of wine to say thank you, and then two, make a long trek to pick that up. But definitely worth it.
I was wondering, because you were driving for quite a while, like how far are you going?
Yeah, I was expecting questions at some point from people about, like, were you anywhere?
Yeah, Drew.
I'm also curious how tall you are, because you seem to be like right at the top of the car, or is it a small car?
Definitely both.
And the phone looks pretty low angle to exaggerate it.
Yeah, Drew, I thought you were just sitting in your car. I didn't even think you were driving. I thought you just went outside.
Yeah. I thought he was sitting in his car.
I texted you. I was like, are you sitting in your car right now? What's going on?
It's interesting. I've worked with a lot of voiceover people. When they're traveling, they will actually record voiceovers in the car because it's often the quietest area you can get for a good audio. So a good mic in a car closed up is often better than almost anything.
Is that why you see so many vloggers doing blogs from their car?
No, that's just
that same thing. What is up with that?
They don't listen to podcasts, so they're trying to pass the time, I think.
Funny enough, cars make
birds have joined us.
good recording environments.
Oh, was that Annette?
I do vocal covers because like they pad sound really well. They don't have much echo. So instead of like putting up foam on my walls, I would record lines in my car.
Yeah. If you don't have like a closet full of clothes, that's probably the better. I've been doing, like, I've got my window treatment over there that actually kills the audio. I've been wanting to do that for a while, so I've been taking voice acting lessons to just learn how to do all that properly. It's kind of fun.
Annette, do you have birds on your shoulder? Oh, I can't hear you.
Yeah, this is Timmy.
Timmy?
Can you say hi, Timmy? No? You do big eagle. Big eagle. He's like, nope, not today. Knock, knock. Okay, that'll work. So yeah, this is Timmy.
Hi.
This is my girl, Rupi.
Awesome.
Timmy usually joins us for our development meetings.
Yes.
So, Annette, you've given similar talks at other events? Is that what you were saying?
Not actually on this topic before.
Oh, okay.
So the first, I'm gonna call it a career-oriented talk I gave was about integration in Plone, and just kind of like the tricks and tips I did to make my work life easier while also empowering my users to change their content. Because we were working with like 120 something websites with an office of 6 people. And we were redoing websites. Usually we tried to redo 26 websites, like a full consultant graphic design and rebuild in a year at minimum. And that's a lot to do very rapidly. And typically we were given about 2 weeks to 1 month for the actual build, content migration and all of that. And the graphic designers got about 1 month for building back and forths and changes. So like we were pushing these out really quickly and really rapidly. And when you're pushing out that many sites, having that many installations of any softwares, it's going to be hard to maintain because every time you have to update, I'm not updating 120 instances of Drupal in any case. 13 instances of Plone, not as bad. Well, 26 dev server. And so I started coming up with like a lot of ways to just make hooks that I could easily trigger, and using like Plone's templates, using some of the Python, the tau, and then using Xalt on the theming language, I was able to just kind of make almost my own little suite of tools that weren't add-ons that needed to be maintained at a code level per se, but were ways that I could just say, okay, I'm going to drop this theme on, I'm going to have all the classes and things I need, and as long as I have a class that I can hit and something that I can extract, that's all I needed to be able to do that. And then I could CSS magic everything else on top of that. So that was the talk I gave at the Python conference, and just basically how I hacked their system to make it bend to my will and put out websites as fast as possible. And then I gave like a quick lightning talk on being an empathetic designer, because one of the big things I always am is I don't have a background in UX design, but like because I've worked front end so much and I know how frustrating it is to get to a site that you can't click that button because it's stuck into the drop down when you hover over it in those kind of situations. Building systems that my users could use, building systems that my users would want to use, and things that they could get excited about. And that was the biggest part of what I always tried to do, is I wanted to leave them with a system that they didn't have to ask me questions about every day. And that they'd be interested in using and excited to take control of their content and actually build their sites.
Awesome. I'm impressed because you were saying you were kind of nervous about doing talks, and it sounds like you've already done quite a few for pushing. It takes a lot to push past that, I think.
Yeah.
So that's awesome.
Yeah, I sat in her talk about what she bent Plone to do and nearly blew my mind. I was like, that's crazy.
Yeah, like you're one of those developers who I'm just like, oh yeah, they're so senior. Someone has had to have done this before. I'm sure they're, and it will always surprise me how interested people are. And that's the best part of like getting into a community, is being able to talk to people and saying, oh yeah, what I'm doing actually is kind of cool and important, and let me know about what you're doing too, because I'm going to try and integrate that into my everyday life as well.
There's advantages of not knowing what's not possible. And a lot of experienced developers get stuck in what they know is possible and don't try the weird edge cases. And there's advantages sometimes of being less embedded, less, skilled in a certain area.
Yeah, that's a really
I don't
good.
know. I mean, I know Plone pretty well, but I get an idea of something, and especially as a developer, I'm like, I wonder if I can hack that. If I can throw that together, I know enough bits and pieces that I can do it. Kind of the same thing what Annette said. Making it do what you want. I just love that you can do that with programming. It's really anything that you can come up with. It's possible. It's just a matter of, do you have time to do it, or does the client have enough money to pay you for the time to do it?
Yeah, I think that curiosity makes some of the best programmers. Now, Annette's pronunciation of a word in her last explanation brought up an interesting party game that I've been trying to sell to other folks, which is you describe a technology to a group of people and you ask them to say it. Like, for example, she said, a technology that can transform one structured template language into another structured template language, and I never heard it pronounced that way in my life. Did you all catch the XSalt? I was like, what is that? What is that? XSLT.
XSLT.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, that's the benefit of not having any peers to teach you things. I'm like, oh, I looked up this thing on the internet. It is now XSalt.
How do you say it? So, like, for example, how do you say the graphics format invented by CompuServe?
I'm just going to say GIF to piss people off.
Do you also say GIF? GIF Hub?
No.
I noticed that more with like non-programmers of, especially, I was talking about C# with someone one day and they were like, oh, I've seen that written so many times and I never knew that that's how it was pronounced. I was like, C# or like, I was like, oh, I never thought that, yeah. Or SQL being actually SQL. I don't know, yeah.
One of my favorites.
I think that's one of those that there are like multiple ways that you can pronounce it and no one really cares, like SQL or MySQL or MySQL. Everyone knows what you're talking about.
In the developer community, yes. And then outside of that, like, what?
Right.
Like an immutable Python sequence is called a what?
Tuple.
That's correct, even though I cannot stop saying tuple.
Yeah, it's fun at our stand-ups. We've got Russian, Polish, English, Scottish, all that. So the pronunciation of all the different stuff sometimes is hilarious.
Especially the Z's.
Yeah, those are my favorite.
Yeah. We were actually looking at number types, millions, billions, and some of those are not the same in different languages. Mm-hmm. As far as 10 powers and things. It was kind of odd. I never realized that it was totally different.
I never realized English was wrong.
Oh, it's wrong in a lot of things.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up with like tens, hundreds, thousands, 10,000, 1 lakh, rather than like 100. So like, I always get a little confused when I look at like larger numbers, because I mean, I guess I can switch between both of them fairly easily now. But like, I grew up with Celsius, and after like 10 years of living here, I don't understand it much anymore. I've just gotten so used to Fahrenheit.
I've switched our whole house to Celsius. Like all the Alexas, all the thermostats, all read in Celsius.
Mm-hmm.
See, the weird thing is if you have time to translate, but what I found out when I did a whole lot of engineering that wasn't software in my last job, injection molding and things, and a German machine, and you mentally don't go to the same danger zones with Celsius. You can't intuit it in your mind at, oh, that's really hot, or that's not, or, it's in your mind, 100 Fahrenheit is getting warm, 140 is dangerous, but on Celsius, you're like, I'm not sure if that's bad or good, or, you know, it's not there. But then I get ticked off when the best metric tape I can get still has inches on one side, so you can't use it. Because if you're doing woodworking, millimeter is good enough, and you don't have to do stupid fractions. You can go 1172, but I can't buy a tape with millimeters on both sides. I thought I got one from UK, and then they shipped it. It was printed wrong, and it was so they refunded. It's like, how hard is it to get a metric tape in this country? Good Lord.
It's near impossible because like I sew and I do woodworking too, and it always drives me nuts when you're just like, oh, 3/8 is 3 point. Like no one wants to memorize those kinds of numbers and divide it.
And the weird thing, I did PCB design a lot because I designed Android tablets last job. It's a long story, but you do a lot of design for surface mount stuff in metric. Through holes were English, but to get PCBs designed, they convert metric to English and then back, and they use 1 decimal too few in a lot of the stuff. So you don't have that 2.54 conversion. Sometimes they lose the 4 and everything all goes to hell. It's like, seriously, how are we still, but even metric designs, they still talk about thicknesses in mils, meaning thousandths of an inch. It's like, seriously.
Yeah, I started in high school and in college. I was like a summer jobs in a machine shop. And so I would rough cut material, but all the prints would have the strangest decimal inches numbers on them because they were all Japanese auto manufacturers that had converted millimeters to inches, but in decimal inches. So
yeah.
And Kelvin, I had a guy once who pronounced, he said he was going to use a PostgreQL store on the project. He thought it was invented by French people, so he made the S silent.
That has very low saturation. It's post gray. Yeah, no color at all.
That's awesome.
Although I found myself, when you learn just from books, you know, back in the early days, and then you start seeing a video on it or something, like, oh, that's how you say. I sound like a moron like too many times.
Yeah, I mean, what I mean, in the world we grew up in, you didn't have necessarily all this audio and video communication, so you didn't talk to the people. You just saw them type it in like IRC or on a mailing list or in a news group, of all things.
Did you say bulletin board?
Yeah. I didn't go back that far.
Oh, really?
Well, no, I did. I mean, I don't think I was doing technology then.
I got in trouble because at 8 years old, I buried cable to my neighbors because our phone was always busy and I always went to bed at 8, so I could call it the local BBSs. And my dad found out. But the phone guy, when he was hooking up the line, was way too helpful for my questions. And I learned that they never punch down all the way up to here. So my dad had pole climbing equipment. So late one night, we punched down lines to each of my friends using the opposite end. And so we had 2 conductors to each of the houses in their auxiliary phone lines. And so we had like a group chat back in, I don't know when that was.
Oh, a real party line.
Yeah, like early 80s. I don't know. It was pretty cool. I powered it up and then everybody.
That's awesome. This has been a lot of fun.
I'm going to run, get the kids down for bed. Really enjoyed the presentations.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, thank you to all of you for putting those together. Those were all really, really great.
Yeah, that was fantastic.
Well done. We'll have to do another group. We'll have to do one together when we can actually be together.
Yes, I would like that too.
Well, thanks Women Code for having us and bringing IndyPy into the fold. I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Yeah, thank you too. I mean, you guys helped us find most of the speakers for tonight, so this has been great.
Cool.
Thanks for everybody for joining.
Yeah, thank you all.
Cool.